Hey, welcome everybody to another episode of I'm Doing Great. My name is Mike, obviously. That's Gina over there.
He was wearing a beanie about 2 minutes ago, but then he took it off. I was going to call him Tim Pool on camera.
No, well, I'm wearing, I took the hat off because I don't want to be too much of a character, but I was watching the movie Midway this morning, so I am wearing a World War II Navy chambray shirt.
There you go.
Took the beanie off, or the watch cap off.
Is this the first episode you've done without a hat on?
No, it's like the third.
That's very
It's the
observant
third.
of me.
Anyway, we're not going to spend too much time on this.
We're not here for your hat.
The reason why I look through a lot of the YouTube comments, which I've been advised not to do that, but you guys have been making some really good suggestions on who we should have onto the show. And one of those people is sitting right next to myself and Gina right now, and I'd like to introduce him. His name is Dyer, correct?
It is.
Dyer.
Or Dyer if you want me to.
Dyer.
Like,
we can
There we
slip
go.
past the algorithm. Dyer, everybody.
Just like the Fic Nuentes.
I didn't want to just parrot your YouTube about you or your websites about you, but from what I can tell, author, commentator. It said comedian. I don't know how often you or what comedian necessarily entails. I don't take
in
it
other
as a
words,
stand-up.
that's in dispute, right? Whether it actually is funny. Or
Right,
not.
so far, yeah. But yeah, give us a little background to yourself.
Right. So I do. We do film analysis. A lot of our more comedic stuff is when we do our podcast. My wife and I on movies. We do symbolic breakdowns of the films. We get pretty wacky. We do some sketch type stuff here and there. We do debates. Done a lot of debates with high profile people from various religious traditions, atheists, Muslims. I host the fourth hour of Lord Voldemort's show, as he's called. I do, what else do we do? Geopolitical breakdowns. We get pretty deep into that domain, do a lot of lectures on that. And that's everything, I think. And then, I've written 2 books, got a third one on the way. Actually 2 more books coming out in the next 6 months. So,
Very cool.
Breakdown. So that's what we do.
Yeah, I mean, your YouTube videos, if you just do an initial scan of them, are very long, very in-depth.
Yeah.
So what I found myself doing since the time we were able to arrange for you to be on the show was to maybe watch like 10 minutes of each one, and it just doesn't crack the surface to what the bodies of the videos are about. But there are a couple of things that I wanted to get you on to talk about. One is World Economic Forum, Great Reset, because we hear these two ideas being thrown around a lot, especially today, and especially with the advent of the CV. So I wanted to get you on and talk about that, and I also wanted to talk to you about religion, especially the fact that you're Christian Orthodox, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and is that the same thing as Greek Orthodox? Is that something from Greek Orthodoxy, or?
Greek Orthodox would be one of the Orthodox nations within the broader, what we say is the Orthodox Catholic Church. So
Okay.
Russian Orthodox, Serbian, Romanian, etc.
Okay. And I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about that. I know Gina was curious.
Yeah.
What did you want to ask me about?
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about where Christian Orthodox falls when we're talking about Catholicism, Protestantism? I mean, because I'm a little ignorant on where it falls.
It falls into the category of the
branches.
right one, and then the other ones are the wrong ones. I'm just playing with you guys.
That's fine.
So basically, for the first 1,000 years of Christianity, you have more or less a unified East-West
Right.
Orthodox Catholic Church, we would say. And then about 1054, roughly, you get the split between the East and the West, mainly over the issue of the place of the Bishop of Rome and a doctrine called the Filioque, which relates to the Trinity. So it's kind of a really difficult, for some people, nuanced idea about what exactly the role of the Holy Spirit is in the Trinity. So basically, the church split after the first 1,000 years. So that's why there's a Roman Catholic Church and then the rest of the Orthodox Church.
What was the Council of Nicaea? Was that the council that was called to talk about the issue of the Trinity, where St. Nicholas got up and slapped that bishop?
Exactly. He pimp smacking.
We talked about that in
We
like
did
the third
briefly
episode.
speak about that.
That's the first council, so that's 325, and they dispute the Trinity basically to smash the Arian crisis, the idea that the second person of Godhead is a creature, and so Arius's doctrine was pretty much squashed at that council, mainly through, as you said, St. Nicholas, also St. Alexander, and St. Athanasius are the heroes of that council. But yeah, so 325 is the first council, and then you've got 6 more going all the way up to 787, which comprise the first 7 ecumenical councils that Roman Catholics and Orthodox agree on, and then like I said, then you have the split after that.
And did that split preempt the Crusades in a way? Because the Crusades started in the early 1000s or late 900s.
Pope Urban in the 11th century calls the First Crusade, and it will unfortunately so the Crusaders will, in one of the Crusades, sack Constantinople, actually, which is at that time Orthodox, and they think that Orthodox are like barbarians because they have beards. But the weird part is like that the Latins were actually hired sort of barbarians that came in and sort of looted and pillaged. But that's one of the results, I would say, of the schism. It's not a cause, but later on, that happened.
And what was the dispute of the role of the Holy Spirit?
So the two main disputes are whether the Pope is the supreme head of the church is the main issue, the papacy. And then the other issue is whether there is one source in the Trinity, namely the person of the Father, or whether the Son also has a role in the Father's causal position of sending or originating the Holy Spirit. So that's what the filioque clause is. Okay. And that's why the Orthodox world doesn't accept that. The Roman Catholic world and the Protestant world does by sort of default. But there's other issues as well. I mean, there's a whole bunch of other, like the Orthodox don't accept the Roman Catholic doctrine of purgatory. They don't accept the sort of extreme view of Mary that we think a lot of Roman Catholics have.
What is that view, to interrupt? The view of Mary?
Well, so you had in the last few instances of the Roman Catholic dogmatic statements, Mary being called that she was immaculately conceived. So we don't accept necessarily the Immaculate Conception, and we don't accept the idea that some Roman Catholic theologians have that she's a co-redemptrix with Christ. So it's really just giving her titles and roles that we don't believe are really appropriate. So part of the Marian doctrines are also bound up with the Western Augustinian doctrine of original sin, which Orthodox don't fully accept all of Augustine's views. So anyway, it gets really nuanced, but those are some of the main issues.
With all the disagreements that what would you call them? Denominations, or I wouldn't call them denominations. Like Orthodoxy isn't a denomination of Roman or even Christianity, is it?
Well, we believe that it's the original church. So we would say pre-denominational in the sense that most denominations kind of spring from later schisms or splits.
Okay.
So that's our take. I mean, obviously other people would think that we're just one of the many denominations, but that's our take.
Despite all the differences, what is I don't want to say goal, but the idea of Christianity in the end is it living a life with Christ, or is it living life the way Christ has taught one to live life so that he ends up in heaven with God? Is that the ultimate goal, or the ultimate, I guess, I don't know how to phrase this question. I probably should have thought about it earlier.
Doctrine?
No, but just, what all these denominations have different ideas of what Christianity is, right? But what is there's got to be a common theme that they all share as far as, life after death, living through Christ and then living with Christ in heaven. I would assume that that's kind of like the end, not the end game, but the end goal.
Yeah, I think most of the denominations share that idea that is sort of the goal. And then the explanations of how that works is, I guess, clearly where we would differ. So in terms of salvation, the Orthodox view is what's called theosis, the idea that we participate in divine life to actually become deified. Mm-hmm. So it's not just, for example, not trying to unfairly characterize a lot of, say, evangelical or Protestant views. A lot of times the focus is on like morals, just being a good person, and that's what it is to live a good life. And certainly we agree that morals play into it, but our focus is also on what we could say is the metaphysical relationship, that it's not just morals, it's also a real ontological participation in God's own immortality, life, power, and glory. So there's another level, I guess you could say, to it in the Orthodox view that's not just about sort of reforming your morals.
Okay. Who do you find yourself debating with the most? Is it with other Christians, or is it with Muslims or Taoists or Buddhists or atheists?
There was no Buddhists at all for years of doing this until we had one dude finally came on a live stream the other day. And I was glad because I was like, yes, finally. It's like the gym and they're finally a Buddha. But they kind of have a philosophy where they don't really debate, because debate kind of, I mean, they can, but it kind of assumes certain views of logic that Buddhism doesn't really have a place for, either ors, right? And they're always trying to like get away from any either ors. But we did finally get a Buddhist dude, but he was the first in, I don't know, 5-6 years of public debating. I've been debating since I was in college. I was kind of a nerd on the debate team and doing that philosophy class and stuff. But public debates started with Adam Kokesh about 5 years ago. And I think,
I remember.
I would say it's about even between atheists and Muslims are like the top people that we've had debates with. And then after that would be Roman Catholics probably. So, and then all the whatever else.
Okay, interesting. I wanted to ask you a question because in one of the live streams that you did, I watched it after the fact, but you were talking about Alan Watt. You'd read something that he had said, and someone had confused it for Alan Watts. And I personally like Alan Watts a lot. Like I've been getting into him a lot more recently. And what I wanted to ask you was, do you think, and I think I know the answer to this question, but do you think that there's any place for people like Ram Dass, Alan Watts, Eckhart Tolle to be almost a companion to Christianity, or the two have to be separate? You can't basically meddle in a little bit of Hinduism, a little bit of Taoism, or just mysticism in general, but then at the same time be a follower of Christ. I would assume you can't do that.
Well, so Orthodox Christianity is unique in the sense that the primary focus when I was talking about theosis is mystical. So it is a mystical ascent to God, and that's really the focus of Orthodoxy, is the experience of God directly in the liturgy. So that's the goal. That's what sometimes people refer to as Palomism, or it's named after the medieval theologian St. Gregory Palamas. So there is the primacy given to the direct experiential in Orthodoxy, which is missing in a lot of Protestant and Roman Catholic Christianity. But at the same time, when it comes to comparative religion, I think we actually have, Orthodox Christianity is an Eastern faith in the sense that it's not like Protestantism or Roman Catholicism focused on the reasoning faculty, even though that may sound absurd for me, given the fact that I'm constantly debating all these people. But we actually view it as just really kind of the doorway. Like debate, there's nothing wrong with it. It's a pointer. Apologetics is a way to point you to the door, but then you got to go into the liturgy itself and experience it directly. So it's a very, as I said, existential type of faith, more so than just a rational kind of discursive faith. But there is a place for the rational discursive. And we also have, there's a lot of good Orthodox comparative religion scholars and theologians. There's a book called Christ the Eternal Tao, where we can look at those things and kind of pick out of even, Far Eastern religions, which do seek to kind of transcend dialectics, the positive aspects. So,
that's really interesting.
Yeah, you would like that book.
Okay, cool. Well, because what I find myself doing, especially recently, I've been able to find, and this sounds so selfish when I say it, but like an inner peace. You know what I mean? But when I'm able to meditate, if I'm doing like an Alan Watts meditation or a Ram Dass meditation, I'm able to find this peace in essentially what I'm looking for from the world, where I've had experiences with Christianity where, I'm listening to the Sermon of the Mount and, I feel something inside of me, a connection there, but nothing like I do with meditation. So I found myself recently moving a little bit further away from Christianity. And it's interesting that you say that the Orthodoxy has a bit of mysticism to it.
Well, be careful, because my friend, when he talks about Ram Dass, he says, well, Ram Dass was gay and his name actually means Ram Dass.
I thought about that for a little, yeah. Yeah.
But it was a cleric who told me that joke, by the way.
So was it really?
That made it even funnier. But yeah.
No, I like Ram Dass, man. I like him a lot. But is there what? Because growing up as a Roman Catholic, you don't get a sense of any sort of mystical aspect of God. You're in there. You're just you're repeating what the priest is saying all in unison. It's almost culty like, which I've said before. How does someone in the Orthodox faith, how do they experience that sort of mystical relationship with God as far as what goes on in a service? So
the idea of the liturgy is, and one thing that's unique to Orthodoxy that is different from Roman Catholicism is that there was never any liturgical revolution. So after Vatican II, the Roman Catholic Church really kind of Protestantized their whole liturgy. So now you get guitar mass, you get, hippie priests, up there basically having rock and roll and this kind of stuff. And it just really degrades the sanctity of the service. And so the traditional Catholics, people like Nick, they would favor the Latin mass because of that sort of stricture and tradition. But in the Orthodox Church, it never left. There was never any liturgical revolution. So the liturgy is basically the same as it was 1700 years ago. So the idea is that that's really the central focus of where you have that direct experience. That's why the icons and the art play such a, we don't call it art, but to Western minds, it looks like, oh, the pretty pictures in the church. I'm not trying to insult you guys. I'm not saying that. But to people from the outside, it looks like, oh, there's all this pretty imagery, icons, basically. No statues or anything like that. And so that it plays a central role in the liturgy because we view it like it's supposed to be heaven on earth. It's the direct window to the uncreated. So you're going to the liturgy to experience uncreated realities in the here and the now. So that I think is very different from the sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Desacralized view of worship that the post-Vatican II Roman Catholic Church kind of instituted. So at the same time as it being very ordered, it's still, I think, avoids the notion of the idea that you don't have an individual experience.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does.
Do Orthodox Christians go to confession?
Yeah, we
Same way
have.
the Catholics
we
do?
have many of the same approaches. It's a little different. There's no booth, so you don't go in a secret booth and whisper to some person that you don't see. But it's more of a direct thing where it's like a spiritual father, so he knows you, and you always go to that person, so he kind of gives you medicine. Whereas in the secret booth, it's more like a transaction. Like an
That's
exchange.
interesting.
Yeah.
Well, essentially, that's what it is. It is the transaction. Okay, say 10 Hail Marys and you're good. You're good to go.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But this is more of a thing where you're seeking healing from the problem rather than just sort of okay, I've screwed up this week, so let me go pay my 10 Hail Marys, right?
Right.
And I know because I was Catholic throughout my 20s. So
Okay. Yeah. Same. It's all Catholic schools up until after college. But do you find modern Christianity disingenuous?
totally, yeah, we've done a bunch of kind of streams, kind of making fun of it that got decent views. So
Okay.
I think that's an excellent way to put it.
Just whenever I see
Clown church, I think is what we called it.
Right. Whenever I see a pastor wearing Nikes, I kind of have to, I really have to be a little skeptical of
Hillsong
what his message is. Yeah, like the Hillsong types of churches. Is there any benefit to those kind of churches, or or are people just too blind to really?
I always call it business church because I feel like, before they got hip, in the last 2 decades, it used to be when you go to those kind of churches, it was like a business meeting. I was raised Protestant and attended a lot of those kind of churches. So I think business church really turned people off. So then they try to be relevant, right? So you got this whole, in the 2000s, the emergent church movement. And I read into all that, and all that was really just kind of constructed by social engineers. It was like, is church just another kind of corporate strategy?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think when you see through that really just people don't find that very appealing. And I think that a lot of, for example, one reason we've been successful in what we do in terms of bringing a lot of people to Orthodoxy is because people are looking for authenticity in especially religion. Because if you're going to give your life to this, you don't want to feel like you're getting conned by like a car salesman or something. You want to really invest yourself in it. And so I think it's not just historicity, but that's a big part of it, that people feel like it's not a recent sort of kitschy invention.
Yeah.
Yeah, the megachurch I grew up in had a whole youth center with a rock climbing wall and fog machines and like foosball tables. And I remember walking around as a high school and I'm like, what is going on here? Because like when I remember the church that I grew up in when I first started going in like elementary school was very small, but then they got corporate. And they like bought a whole new campus and they had concerts and stuff. And it was very disingenuous. And of course now I sometimes I'll pop onto their Instagram just to see what they're doing. They changed their name from Savannah Christian Church to Compassion Christian Church. And they posted all the stuff about George Floyd. And I'm like, I'm so not surprised. You guys are such frauds.
Yeah, I have just sent you one of the skits I did because I did a megachurch pastor, Randy Balls, and he has a...
Randy.
He has a motocross rally in his church, and there's like a water slide that you get baptized in. So, I mean, it sounds like satire, but then when people tell me about their megachurch experiences, it's basically real.
It's real. So, there's that really funny show on HBO now called The Righteous Gemstones.
Yeah, we love that, right?
Yeah, I have to
come on now. Up. Y'all trying to get up in my finances now.
Yes. I'm a couple episodes behind, but it's so funny because I watch it and I'm like, yeah, actually a lot of the things that they put as satire is those are the things that I saw growing up in these insane megachurches. It's just like several different campuses and they're live streaming across all the campuses and constantly trying to be relevant to the youth, constantly trying to do things to bring the youth in. And it's almost creepy.
Well, do you remember, did you guys have, because I grew up Baptist in the Bible Belt, so we had the Power Team. Do you remember the Power Team?
I don't know
what.
Okay, so in the show, have you seen season 2?
I'm a couple episodes in.
So the dudes that are all buff, the God Squad, that's real. Okay, so they used to look them up. They're called the Power Team, and they would travel to all the Baptist churches, and it's like, they look up the Power Team on YouTube. They'll like bust bricks and
in the name of Jesus.
Yeah, it's like, see,
this is
we can
real.
bust a brick. So like, come pray the sinner's prayer. Like, what?
It's one of the things that I appreciated, at least growing up, especially in high school, was I went to Catholic high school, and they were Jesuit. They were Jesuit. Missionaries.
Mm-hmm. You guys would have the Power Bottom Team.
The Power Bottom team, not the Power Top team. No, but at least they kept tradition. They weren't trying to appealing to any youth or anything like that. It was, this is the Catholic Church. This is how it is. Does one, in order to join Orthodox Church, does one have to get rebaptized?
Yeah, I was going to ask that
There's
too.
a flexibility in terms of how the Orthodox Church receives converts, because they typically do it on the basis of case by case. So like depending on what one's background was, but then some jurisdictions within the Orthodox Church kind of have a one size fits all policy for reception. But so like Russian Orthodox typically will just baptize. So they don't definitively say that you weren't baptized, but they just do it to conform to the traditional practice of how the church has always done it with a triune immersion. So because we think that the way that you're baptized is intended to signify the Trinity. Right. And if somebody did it in a weird way, it kind of signifies like a, heterodox view of the Trinity. And for Orthodoxy, the Trinity is like first and foremost. Like you start there, everything else flows from that, which is again why filioque is such a big deal. Like what seems like minutia actually ends up being kind of a big deal.
What language do they do the services in?
Kind of depends on where you go. So if you go to a church, it's always tailored to the majority. So if the vernacular speaks English, they'll do the liturgy in English.
Okay.
If most of the people there are like Russian expatriates, they'll do it in Slavonic or Romanian or whatever. If you go to the Greek church, they do it in Greek mostly. But the homily and stuff like that will be
right. So are the structures pretty similar to, let's say, like a Catholic Mass, where a couple of readings, homily, and then communion?
It's a lot more elaborate. So what the closest thing I could think of would be, did you ever, when you were Catholic, did you ever go to a Latin Mass?
Once.
Or what they call a high Mass?
Yeah.
Basically every service is like that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
So there's always incense, vestments. The whole thing is sung.
Mm-hmm. I was an altar boy.
The whole liturgy is sung. So
really?
Even the kids,
yeah,
like little kids will be in the church. There's no pews typically. Everybody's just standing there or sitting down, and then the kids sing.
Where are they sitting?
The floor.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. That's the ancient practice. So.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
That is interesting.
But the first thing that struck me when I attended was that I was used to, okay, you sing a hymn or two, or you sing a few, and then you recite stuff, and then you sit down and you listen, and the whole thing is sung. So everything.
Oh, what drew you to? Were you Orthodox? This is off camera. I'm talking. Were you Orthodox before, or okay? So what drew you to it?
Well, I was super nerdy into philosophy and history, so I was reading church fathers, reading the history of biblical theology, all that stuff, just on my own, but personal interest. And I kind of read my way out of Protestantism into Roman Catholicism in my 20s. And then I just eventually, more and more reading led to more and more problems that I had with the papacy, Vatican II. So I was really concerned with, being in a traditional church and that ultimately I read my way into Orthodoxy, basically.
Okay, so the papacy is the head of the Catholic Church. So who is the head of your Orthodox Church?
So it's decentralized. So the highest office is a bishop. There's nobody higher than a bishop.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it's a conciliar. It's a conciliar model of the church. So there's no one dude. The highest is any bishop, but there are like sort of what's called canonical privileges that certain metropolitans have, and that's just the older tradition of the way the church functioned for like the first 1,000 years. So we would, if Rome had never split, we would have considered Rome the first of the patriarchs. Okay. Amongst the many bishops. So
interesting. And I have a question for you. I want to get at Gina if there's anything that you...
Oh, it was dead air. I'm just thinking, I'm so curious because, I grew up Protestant, but was very, very disillusioned with the whole Protestant megachurch thing. So when I left high school, I probably identified as atheist or agnostic for like most of my 20s, and then came back to Christianity just a couple of years ago. So this is very interesting to me. I don't think I've ever met an Orthodox Christian before. So it's like,
there's in Brooklyn, new. I think there was a pretty big, was it Greek Orthodox or like Russian Orthodox? Because there were a lot of, in Greenpoint, there were a lot of Poles, a lot of Russians and some Greeks in Astoria, especially in Queens. So I think there was a big population of Orthodox communities in New York growing up that I remember. But again, I never really met.
Yeah, I also grew up in the South, though, in like South Georgia. So there's probably not many.
Well, Orthodoxy is really growing. It's one of the fastest growing churches.
Is it?
Yeah.
How judgmental are you guys? Because I find myself recently being really disenchanted with Christians as a group. Not as a group.
But I keep telling Mike that's like it's not Christians as a group. It's humans. People are annoying, and they'll always try to find some way to criticize you online. And especially if you're kind of catering to like a conservative Christian audience, they're always going to find ways to, to troll you about Christianity.
The problem is that when we first started the show, I think I talked about my Catholic background, and he's like, oh, I might be finding my way back into Christianity, reading some things, getting very interested. And then as the show went on, people just kept on complaining that I was blaspheming all the time. And I didn't really get where they were there again.
And then we found out
later.
Well,
you said God Jesus here, and then you said Jesus here. You probably shouldn't be doing that. And then a lot of the other comments were like, you're going to burn in hell. You should really stop doing that. And I said,
they say that?
Oh, yeah. I got a lot of burn in hell ones. Don't read the
comments.
Well, I read them just because if I didn't, we wouldn't end up with Jay here. But
that's true.
But no.
She does a podcast too, my wife, and I always tell her, don't read the comments because you're going to get upset. Right?
Have you read the comments that much? Okay, good. That's a rule that I should get into. But I'm the one who kind of like uploads everything and has to monitor everything. But where is
the comments are brutal, man. I get hated on all the time. So
yeah, of course. The two people. Sorry, just to interject really quick. The two people who never read comments, and you can tell in the way that they deliver information: Tucker Carlson and Joe Rogan. They both have a freedom about them because they never, ever, ever read the comments. So they are just uninhibited. They're free. They're doing their thing, and they're both so successful in their own ways. And I think there's a lot of power to just not reading the comments because you're free.
Well, the funny thing about comments is that people will, like, the weirdest, most ridiculous comment will stick in your head.
Yeah.
That you shouldn't even pay attention to.
Yeah, 100%.
Like, why do you snort every time? And I'm like, I've explained this in every live stream that I have really bad allergies, and there's dust in my library because of books.
Yeah.
And they're like, he does coke clearly because he constantly snorts. There's no other reason why a person would snort other than doing cocaine before every live stream. I'm like,
so now I just own it. I'm like, time to do the cocaine before the live stream. So that's a good question. I think in any denomination or group, you're going to have super judgmental Pharisees. So, I've met a lot of Pharisaical minded Orthodox people, but they're everywhere too. So I think the coolest people I met the worst people and the best people are Orthodox. What do you think?
Yeah.
The
best and the worst.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the more pious you become in that church, the more humble you are.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the less judgy you are.
Yeah.
So that's why that's why I say 4-letter words to sound cool and not judgy.
Do you know of Cliff Nettle?
Cliff Nettle.
Mm-hmm.
He's the Ask Cliff.
Person
that I always bring up. Right. what he does is he's been doing this for years. He goes to different college campuses and he will just stand there and talk about the gospel, and then he will debate with people who come up to him. And his videos, if you've watched 5 of them, you've pretty much seen all of them, but they still happen. And he's just debating, moral relativists and atheists, and, people saying, well, if I just live a good life, can I go to heaven? And he says, if you know of Christ, but if you don't believe in him, then no. But if you've never heard of Jesus Christ before and you lived a good life, yes, you can exist in heaven. And that's who I've recently been watching to get kind of back into Christianity, because I understand it. I know of Christ. I want to get back into it, but what ends up happening is I see a lot of the hypocrisy out there, and it kind of turns me off in a way where, Alan Watts again just talking about Taoism, and just it seems like a little bit of a selfish sort of Taoist. Is that a religion or no? Is that just a kind of?
I think it could be conceived as a religious philosophy, kind of like Zen,
Sure.
But I'm not super expert on Far Eastern stuff. So.
Right. In those, I just see a lot of like eyes in it, where Christianity, you feel a little bit more part of a whole. But anyway, here's the question. Sorry, I digress. Gavin told me just ask the question.
Oh yeah.
You go on these tangents.
Gavin sent Mike a review, I suppose we can call it. We'll play it on
He
the
did
next
an
episode.
impersonation of me.
Yeah.
I'll put it on.
It was like
I'll
a
put
minute
it on
and a
story.
half. It was a minute and a half.
I do a lot of impersonations too. So
what are your best ones?
He can impersonate me asking a question.
Do a good Lord Voldemort.
I've got to listen to more of you. We were doing Nick on the way. We was listening to your Nick discussion, so I was impersonating Nick on the way up here. Yeah,
oh, really?
Nicolas Cage?
Yeah.
Oh, can we see it?
Should we do it? While you're doing it, should the camera be on Gina so you don't see your face? Because a lot of problems I have with impressions, if they don't look like the person, then it's kind of harder to.
Really? Just by sound? But sometimes I think the facial expressions help. Like if you're imitating Robert De Niro, you have to do the. You need the face with it.
Well, hold on. I'm trying to think of the ones So I do. Oh, there's like 50. I don't know. There's a whole roster, whole retinue of them, but yeah, I can do a pretty good Nick. Nick is really into what he's talking about, if you've ever noticed. And then he does a whole routine where he talks about getting possessed by the characters, and he pulls out a little voodoo thing that he does. He calls it neo-shamanic. That's his style of acting. I don't know.
I love National Treasure.
Yeah.
That's the one you went with? I'm more of an 8mm guy.
Whoa.
So someone wanted me to ask you this. They said, ask Jay if he remembers which saint or church father wrote about the triadic nature of reality or a similar concept. Remember hearing him talk about it in a stream years ago, and I can't remember.
Yeah, St. Maximus the Confessor. He's the guy that I read that read me kind of into Orthodoxy when I was because when I got tired of Roman Catholicism, I kind of got burnt out on theology because I'd put so much time into it, and then I was just like, I forget it, I'm sick of this. And then because of his, I wouldn't say Eastern philosophy. I mean, it's a less Western philosophy is what attracted me to him. And he has a really deep analysis in the Ambigua, and then a book called Question and Answers, where he talks about how reality is actually man himself, and reality is structured in a triadic way that images Father, Son, and Spirit. So it's a fascinating metaphysic.
Do you hear that, Al Hernan 706? Your question has been answered. I have another question. What are your feelings on the origins of the universe? Have you ever debated any atheists about this? Because there are Christians who have to point to the Big Bang, for some bit of evidence that there is a God.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a problem with that, only because if I think about the way time works, if there's, an infinite future and an infinite past, how can we point to like one point in time and say, this is where everything started? Have you ever thought about that?
Yeah. So in terms of the debate, probably the most prominent YouTube theistic atheist, Inspiring Philosophy, and I were supposed to have a debate 2 years ago. He backed out because he said I was too mean. So that never happened. And it's funny because somebody asked me yesterday, when are you going to debate IP? When are you going to debate Inspiring Philosophy? I'm like, you mean the dude that backed out 2 years ago because I was too mean? So no, that debate never happened, but I wish it had. But I actually take a creationist view. So I'm actually pretty out there. I do a lot of philosophical critiques of Darwinism. So I'm pretty anti-Darwin.
Would you say to say something like a belief in Darwinism as far as a process and not an origin is one way to look at it?
Yeah, if by Darwinism you mean adaptation, I definitely believe that the species has it hardwired into them to adapt. But I don't believe there's any proof or evidence. I think it's kind of absurd to think that one species mutates into another. So the transmutation of species, I don't believe in. But
the soup.
Yeah, but the idea of adaptation, sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I don't. That's one of the things that I had a problem with watching this guy Cliff. In a lot of his videos, he just continuously points to the Big Bang as far as the origin or the creation of the universe. And I always like the oscillating theory of the universe. It's just the death of one universe into the birth of another one that's just everlasting. It's tough. I can't wrap my head around it. I don't even know if we're supposed to or even be able to.
Yeah, well, I think there is a unique... You can make a philosophical argument for creation ex nihilo, which would make time have a beginning point and a telos endpoint. So I do a kind of a weird, unique type of apologetic argumentation called Transcendental Argument. So that's a presuppositional critique, so to speak, of two competing paradigms. So basically you lay out the Christian metaphysic and its view of logic and metaphysics, et cetera. And then you compare that to any other paradigm, which will, in my view, kind of collapse. So the transcendental argument, I think, is the best argument for all of the Christian system, but it also includes creation ex nihilo, because if time is also eternal, then actually I think you would end up with arguments where you couldn't actually know anything.
Right.
Because the past and the present would also kind of be illusory. They wouldn't really exist if time is eternal. But it seems like humans are constituted such that they learn things in beginning, middle, end sequences.
Linearly.
Yeah. So that sequence, which is itself, by the way, triadic, if you read St. Augustine, seems to suggest that humans are just constituted such that we can only have knowledge in that beginning, middle, end way. And even communication itself, think about sentences, even if it's a mundane conversation, has a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Arrival.
Yeah. And so without that as kind of a structural precondition for reality or rationality or epistemology, I would actually argue that epistemology isn't possible. So I think that's a pretty good argument.
What is epistemology?
In the domain of philosophy, that's the doctrine of knowledge. How we know what we know. Are our beliefs rational? Can we justify our beliefs? Those are all epistemic questions. Okay.
And would you agree that the problem with atheism is the idea that if they do the moral relativism, we're all just a bunch of matter floating around, and morality really means nothing. Do you agree that it's tough for an atheist to live that out?
Yeah, it would be impossible to live out, which I suppose if you wanted to be a really consistent atheist, you could be like, well, I don't have to be consistent with my presuppositions, right? There's nothing that binds me, right? So I could just do whatever I want. But the thing about that is that when an atheist comes to a debate, they're not acting that way, and they're assuming that there are objective, logical, rational principles that we're all bound to, hence debate. Otherwise, debate wouldn't be possible.
Right.
So if they're committing themselves to principles and they're engaging in the action of debating, what I'm going to point out is that you're acting or assuming that these logical categories and universal principles are the case as you simultaneously sort of deny them. And so I would point that out as a pretty fundamental flaw in their system.
Okay. And earlier did you say theistic atheists before?
Theistic evolution. So there are, like, one of the top guys who is an evangelical Christian who defends evolution. His name is Inspiring Philosophy. So he's a YouTuber guy who we were going to have a debate a couple of years ago, but he backed out. So
gotcha. Okay.
There are quite a few people who defend, the idea that Christianity and evolution are compatible. I don't think that they are. I don't necessarily hate everybody that believes that, but I think it's incorrect. I think you can demonstrate it, but I'm not, since my domain, my study isn't biology or life sciences or whatever. My critiques are always the philosophical. Yeah.
Gotcha. Do we want to talk about WEF?
Yes.
Okay.
Please. Yeah.
So, World Economic Forum, we're hearing a lot about it right now. I really don't know what it is other than I'm not supposed to like them. And I was wondering if you can just give us, a basic run through of what the World Economic Forum is, who runs it, and what it's promoting.
I think it helps to understand, geopolitically speaking, the last 100 years of how the world transitioned from the British Empire to Pax Americana. If we understand that, there's a big fat book that I lectured through some years ago called Tragedy and Hope. And that's a really important tome because Dr. Carroll Quigley, was Bill Clinton's professor. Like he's the one that trained me and everything I know. So Bill's mentor is the archivist and historian of the Council on Foreign Relations, which is one of these big global steering committees that really kind of sets policy for a lot of things, like you could argue for the world in a way, because they're based on the British Empire's model of steering committees, or what was originally called the Royal Institute for International Affairs, which is itself a front for Lord Rothschild and Cecil Rose's plan to build the British Empire into a world empire.
Okay.
And there's a book that Lord Curtis wrote, one of the people in their circles, called Commonwealth of God. It doesn't have anything to do with God, but it was just the front, basically, the plan that they had to build this world federation. And so it kind of went through a few phases that failed. The British imperial model didn't last, but around the time of World War II, right before World War II, the British wanted to bring the Americans back under their sway. So they sent Ian Fleming, the guy who created James Bond, literally sent him over to buddy up to a lot of people in the U.S., along with a few other British intelligence agents like William Stevenson out of Canada, Noel Coward, the famous children's book author and actor. And they convinced FDR and other people, Bill Donovan, to create the OSS, which would become the CIA. And that's really kind of the busybodies of the deep state shadow government, you could say. And so they functioned perfectly to do their job to get the U.S. back into this, what's called Anglo-American establishment. That's one of Quigley's other books that he wrote that goes along with Tragedy and Hope. And this really is just the explanation of the Western power bloc. So for the last 100 years, we haven't really had sovereign nation states. We've had in the West a power bloc that succeeded in knocking out, in the 20th century, their two rivals, the Austro-Hungarian Empire and Russia. So that was the point of the two world wars and the Cold War. That's what Quigley's whole big book is about. And again, he's writing not as a conspiracy theorist, but as the archivist and historian for this clique.
Okay.
So what I did was, I was like, all right, so when I read that, I was like, this is crazy. This is real. And, you don't get told this, even in, the philosophy classes I was taking in college and whatnot. You don't learn this kind of stuff. So I was like, I'm going to get the writings of the elite for the last 100 years. And we've read, I think, 50, maybe 60 now. And we just lecture through those. So all I do is basically just read from their text, explain, summarize, and lecture what they say. And that demonstrates a continuity of plan from 100 years ago. And I mean, it goes back longer than that, but it's easy to pick out 100 years ago and then go all the way up to now with recent writings from the elite, like Klaus Schwab from World Economic Forum, who in his books has the exact same plan and agenda that people that were writing 100 years ago. So that's an easy way to see that, wait a minute, so the World Economic Forum is just another one of these sort of public steering committee debate groups of Fortune 100, Fortune 500, banking elite, et cetera, that are intent on pushing this Great Reset / ultimately world government model.
That's the
and
goal.
I mean, he even says it like in all these talks, right? We are going to get inside your biology. We're going to get inside of you, right? He's like, we're not going to change your mind. We're going to change you.
Who is he, Klaus Schwab?
Yeah.
He was a foreign academic recruited at Western Ivy League universities to be part of this CIA/CFR created entity known as the World Economic Forum. Ultimately, he was recruited by Kissinger out of the superstructure of the elite.
Okay.
And Kissinger was kind of put in there by the Rockefellers. So it's the same Rockefeller who allied with the British elite, Cliveden set, Astors, and so forth, Cecil Rhodes, Rothschild Group. So that's who runs our Western power bloc, is these people. And the World Economic Forum is just one of these many entities. Bilderberg is another one that people have probably heard of. But yes. Klaus used to be the head of Bilderberg. So then he then he went on to be WEF head. Is
anyone to trust anyone who's involved with the World Economic Forum?
I mean, it depends on, I guess, on what level.
In the capacity, like let's say like a Dan Crenshaw or a Tulsi Gabbard.
I mean,
young leaders.
Right. I mean, Putin was a young leader as well. A lot of people have been invited to those meetings. So, I mean, attending meetings and conferences doesn't necessarily mean that you're on board with everything that you're invited to. But at the same time, I mean, I think we should have a healthy suspicion of people that, because they potentially obviously could be. And I think it would be reflected in their, their voting record and their actions, rather than whether they attended a meeting or a conference. But, I mean, if you read Klaus's books, I mean, he's very open about what all he wants to implement. And again, I
saw a clip of him talking about wanting to put a chip in everybody.
Yeah.
So that's real. They actually want to do that.
Yeah, the whole so he in 2018 or 19 he wrote Fourth Industrial Revolution, and the last third of that book is about basically Skynet, like Terminator Skynet level stuff. And
really?
Like we're gonna
social credit score for sure. That's part of it. Nanotechnology,
Internet of Things, total Skynet tracking, all of that. Yeah.
It's is there like a Black Mirror episode with Bryce Dallas Howard?
Oh, right.
Rate everybody.
Exactly.
Is there anyone that you know of who's prominent who's fighting this kind of way of the way of this wanted future that elites want to push? Or are you kind of doing that?
Well, I guess it depends on by prominence. Like, I mean, obviously there's alternative media figures way bigger than my audience. That,
sure.
You've got
Voldemort and
Tucker, you've got Lord Voldemort, you've got, to a degree, I guess Joe Rogan is at least aware of this, and at least on his podcast he offers opposing views, which people don't like very much. But in amongst very wealthy, powerful people, there would be few and far between. I don't really.
I'm wondering, just because I'm thinking of this as a movie, you have this group of people who could be characterized as villains, and I'm trying to think who would be protagonists or who would be heroes, sort of fighting this out front and not necessarily behind the scenes, but who would be the Klaus Schwab on the other side? Yeah.
I mean, I think really the best hope is something like Orthodox Christianity. I mean, that's kind of because the deeper I got into the geopolitical espionage conspiracy domain, the more I was driven to like facing up to the reality of evil. I mean, like if you look at the Malthusian depopulation plan that's sort of undergirding all of this, and the entire British Empire and its philosophy, and the Great Reset's philosophy, I mean, it's pretty much demonic. I mean, in my view, there's no other way to explain it. And so to me, it's a good testament to the reality of evil, spiritual evil, not just human conspirings. I think it goes beyond just the human domain.
On some Da Vinci Code level of evil.
Like real evil. Yeah.
Right,
like,
exactly.
I mean, like, human sacrifice, like mind control stuff. If you get deep into...
What about the blood? What's the blood stuff? The drinking the blood for the
adrenochrome?
Right. Do you know anything about that stuff, that the elites are drinking the blood of infants or babies and they scare them to get the adrenaline up?
Right.
Well, so I don't know how widespread that is, but it is a real thing.
Right.
And there are people who do practice, satanic rituals, black masses, etc. that do take that serious.
Very happy with my life, and I'm non-suicidal.
They do take that.
I love my life and my husband and my baby. So.
Yeah. Well, someone wanted to ask me about, I can't remember who it was. Someone wanted me to ask you about your thoughts on Kanye, if you had any thoughts. Do you know who Kanye West is?
I do. I don't have much of a...
I think they wanted to know about what type of... Because they said there is devil worship within Christianity. Or there is demonic...
Sure. Yeah.
Like demonic worship inside Christianity. So someone who's saying that he's pushing Christianity can also have demonic imagery and sort of satanic worship within that, trying to push.
Well, a lot of people who take their Satanism seriously will pretend to be Christians as part of their ritual process. So, and they can get away with a lot of things that it makes Christianity look ridiculous. So that does occur. I don't follow Kanye regularly. I mean, I like some of his songs. I think he's a interesting character. A lot of stuff that big celebrities put out, it's hard to know what's PR and fake stories and what's real. So I don't really know what all's real between him and the Pete Davidson drama and all that.
Sure.
But it's weird that he's had these kind of phases of kind of hinting like there is a real conspiracy amongst the celebrities. And, he hints at this every now and then, and he has this Jesus phase and whatnot. I don't really have any.
He just recently came out and said that it's a setup that Pete Davidson is with Kim now because Pete's got the tattoo of Hillary, and Kanye was hinting that it was just it's all being orchestrated.
Well, there's a there's a do you know of a guy named Larry Johnson?
Yeah, I was just thinking about him actually.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So he's one of these numerology guys that everything can be basically broken down into this number system.
In other words, schizophrenia.
Yeah. I'm
joking.
No, but yeah, kind of. When you see his post, you're like, oh my God. But he was saying that these celebrities get up to a certain status that can only happen from selling your soul, from sacrifice. It's why someone like Kanye's mother died, or people lose children, and then they, are elevated to this level of celebrity.
Right.
With the Kanye thing, and I imagine some people's problem, especially when regarding Christianity, is they see Kanye on the same stage as a Marilyn Manson, and I think it's Lil Uzi Vert, who has literal demonic imagery in the stuff that he puts out. So the question which naturally will come is, how can someone who presents himself as a Christian be on stage next to these two people? Is that genuine?
Yeah, I think it does give us a healthy reason to question the authenticity of that. But then again, I mean, maybe what he was exposed to wasn't even authentic Christianity. Just maybe he went to Joel Osteen's megachurch. I think I saw Kanye on stage with Osteen at one point.
Right,
so I don't know if that's what he thought Christianity was. Right. I don't know, but there is definitely something to the notion of celebrities who want to rise up in that structure having to make their bones. I always just make the analogy to the way that everybody knows organized crimes and gangs work. And I've done a lot of research, 2 books on Hollywood, and a lot of that overlaps with the music industry as well. So there's a lot of, kind of like make your bones if you want to rise up in the music industry. And that's because they want to have dirt on people and make sure that you don't go off script. And so a lot of times I think that whether they really believe the Satanism or not, or the cult that they're in, or the Crowleyanism or whatever, those cults like that are great ways to blackmail people, to get dirt on people.
To Epstein.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to use the Jeff Stein McEfrey. That's to guard on YouTube.
Oh, right. Oh, thank you for that. Yeah, you're looking
Larry
out.
I have a whole retinue of code words.
Larry Johnson was pointing out a video of Rihanna who's apparently pregnant, and he did a close-up, and it looks very much like green screen. And then there's also, Larry Johnson's also someone who talks a lot about how Beyonce's twins, that was totally fake.
Well, Jamie had a whole thing on Beyonce and her book. So she has a book too. We should have brought one of your books, but on Hollywood, I'm saying.
We can drop that link in the description.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Too.
But do you remember that? Like didn't she have a fake baby thing? Like what was
the bump,
yeah,
right?
Yeah,
the bump
that's
was
fake. Yeah, I heard from somebody who works in security who said that he has it on very good authority that someone he knew in that field would literally watch her take off her belly and get on the plane. Like, just totally fake.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, see, a lot of that stuff's like PR.
Yeah.
Remember Jacko's hyperbaric chamber?
What's that?
Michael Jackson.
Oh. Yeah.
So he would sleep in a hyperbaric chamber. Yeah. That was created by his publicist.
So he never did sleep in a hyperbaric?
Well, he would do it for the cameras, but not.
Oh, right.
So
another thing that I think was totally fake was Chrissy Teigen's miscarriage. I think that was totally just fabricated.
Yes.
Yeah.
We did a podcast with Chrissy Mayer, who went after Chrissy Teigen for that stuff, and made fun of her, went viral. It was funny.
Yeah, I mean, it was so obviously fake.
Right. Remember that?
This whole Hollywood pedophile thing, I can't escape it from being untrue. It's got to be true, right? Just the way people act, especially with children, right? Have you gone into this in any of your books?
Man, we're saying a lot of things, guys. We love life, okay?
Well, the first chapter that I did in my book is Eyes Wide Shut. So I did like a huge deep dive on that.
Which one? 2 or 1?
Part 1 is the first 80 pages is Kubrick films. So I do an analysis of Eyes Wide Shut.
Do you like Kubrick?
Yeah.
Okay. I like Eyes Wide Shut a lot. Yeah.
And I kind of argue that Kubrick was like, telling us what's really going on,
Did he shoot the moon landing?
I don't think so, no.
Okay. Do you think that we went to the moon? This is devolving very quickly. But
I'm a skeptic on a lot of mainstream claims. I'm not like a flat earther or anything.
Okay.
But I do have skeptical
That was our
views.
next question.
I have skeptical views of a lot of kind of normie science.
Sure.
So, but that doesn't mean that I necessarily adopt XYZ conspiracy. So,
Right.
But no, I take a skeptical approach to a lot of that stuff. I try to only really go into what I can document and prove.
Right.
So if I've read something from the elite that documents it, or if there's court cases like the finders of people doing, child trafficking, that kind of stuff, that's all public. I'll talk about that, but I don't really go off into stuff I can't prove.
But the Kubrick stuff, especially with the influence of sex cults and Eyes Wide Shut. Yeah. Did you kind of went into... Oh, interesting. I'll be interested to read that a lot.
Well, I wrote that too. That was 2016. So my Eyes Wide Shut analysis I wrote in 2010, and then I put it in the book in 2016 or 17. So, or 18, I can't remember. But I mean, it was a lot of what is in my books has been vindicated in the last few years. So, because I talked about Great Reset stuff, I talked about like mass forced stabbies.
Yeah,
that's in my book too.
I call them jib jabs.
There you go.
Yeah,
exactly.
I don't want this episode to get taken off. Obviously.
Yeah, right.
What do you think is there a next step? I mean, clearly Russia ended the Vidvid. So, what do you think is next for any sort of suppression or control?
Well, I'm not sure that we will see an end to these conflicts. So I think they could continue on. They could scale up. A lot of people think that we might have a larger global war eventually. Might even be related to Taiwan. But I don't know for sure. But I think that whatever will provide the pretext for the next phase of the Great Reset, which they kind of roll it out like a business plan. So a lot of the crises are kind of engineered, and they sort of come out at the right time. And if you look at something like Operation Lockstep, which is in the Rockefeller white paper from 12 years ago, that predicted the scenarios. They give 4 potential scenarios. The CUFID was clearly the first one, Lockstep. But there's 3 or 4 other scenarios that they could roll out as well. That could include like mass cyber pandemic. So I covered Klaus's whole presentation on Cyber Polygon recently on one of the 4th hours of Voldemort. So massive cyber pandemic or, economic collapse.
What would a cyber pandemic entail?
Well, there's back doors. So if you know about the Promise technology, like most of the tech has a back door. So it would actually be done by something like that, or like a private entity. If you watch the movie, what's the Bruce Willis?
The one with the kid?
No.
12 Monkeys?
No. Well, 12 Monkeys is relevant, I guess, for the bio scenario.
Well, I was thinking about Mercury Rising.
No, it's the Die Hard Salvation. I think it's that one. So that one's about a massive cyber pandemic.
Oh, one of the diehards. Yeah. Okay.
And in that, it's a private entity. It's not like the NSA. It's a private entity that basically shuts down Wall Street and these different things. And there's like a big collapse, basically. So, but that's based on one of the Pentagon strategists, Andrew Marshall.
Yeah.
He wrote essays about that kind of stuff. So if you look up Cyber Polygon, they just ran these exercises as to what a mass pandemic would look like. Basically, it would be like the supply chains getting hit. It would be banks. It would be, stock market, that kind of stuff.
Right.
So that's a potential scenario that, Klaus keeps talking about. He said, when there's a cyber polygon, it will make COVID look like a walk in the park.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. So
what a great villain.
Like I mentioned to you before we started rolling cameras, I was watching, I forgot if it was a debate or something. You mentioned how movies like Zero Dark 30, Argo are all propaganda. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So when I was doing my grad work, I focused on the history of film as propaganda. So I did my thesis on the way that Ian Fleming used James Bond as Cold War propaganda. Yeah. So he kind of becomes an icon of Western democratic capitalism. And so he's the figure that most embodies this ultimately in kind of a Nietzschean way. So what I got into sort of unexpectedly was how deep that rabbit hole goes. I had no idea how intimately tied to the Pentagon and the CIA and the different agencies Hollywood was. And it's like flip sides of the same coin. And then in the last several years, I was doing that like 10 years ago, but in the last few years, we've seen quite a few Hollywood people kind of themselves come out and talk about this. So I mean, Ben Affleck has talked about it in interviews. Like, oh yeah, Hollywood and the CIA are the same, basically. Bruce Willis has talked about it in interviews. And many A-list celebrities actually do spying, and this is an old thing. Like, this goes back to the earliest days of Hollywood. Many of the A-list celebrities were spies. So
what, like working like with the OSS?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Mo
like
Berg.
Humphrey Bogart or something like that, probably.
Bogey might have been, I'm not sure, but Jimmy Stewart did side spying for the FBI. It's rumored,
really?
yeah.
Wow.
Errol Flynn was rumored to be a Nazi spy. Coco Chanel was a Nazi spy. Mo Berg, the catcher, was OSS. Julia Child, the famous TV cook, was OSS spy.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh wow, I didn't know any of that.
And there's tons more. I could keep going.
What was the movie, the documentary? Was it Four came back about the Hollywood directors who went with the 8th Air Force and they were filming they were filming bombing raids, and they came back because one of the directors happened to have been on what was the plane that did the first 25 successful missions and came back and did a tour of the U.S. Not the Enola Gay, that was the atomic bomb. The Memphis Belle.
Sounds right.
And I think some really big directors at the time, were, I guess, volunteered for the army and were sent out to basically propagandize these missions and bring them back home and show them to audiences in the States.
Yeah, the earliest, I mean, when the camera was invented, it was pretty quickly being used for war propaganda. Governments were using them right away. The Soviets used it for propaganda. Nazi Germany did. The U.S. did. Some of the first blockbusters were war propaganda. So Howard Hughes's movie Hell's Angels in the 20s or 30s. That's a big gigantic. That was a blockbuster at the time.
Yeah.
It was all just war propaganda.
Oh, really?
So he was actually working with. He's one of the first examples of like a high profile producer director who was literally working like hand in hand with the War Department, I think is what it was called at that time. It was before it was renamed to be called the Department of Defense.
Right, yeah.
By Bernays, by the way, he came up with that.
The War Department's such a better name. Anyway.
Yeah, isn't that cool?
Yeah.
It's honest, right?
Right,
It's like,
yeah,
we're
exactly.
the Department of War, we start shit. What do you want?
We start shit. What do you want?
Who was that?
I'm going to my Tony.
Oh, Tony Soprano? Yeah, I do a horrible Tony Soprano. It's a difficult situation. I can't do it.
You tried to do it once.
Sorry.
It's not your best. You do a good McConaughey.
Well, all right, okay. We'll go with that one.
That's all right.
Yeah, that's all right. Okay.
Once I get Lincoln in the space.
Here's a question about
That's good.
No, what was the movie where it was an actress in the 60s who was doing work with and giving money to the Black Panthers, and then she was essentially, the movie portrays her as being kind of made crazy by the FBI tapping her phones, and what was it called? Jane's. Kristen Stewart played her in a movie. Look that up. Look up Kristen Stewart movie FBI Black Panthers, but it was pretty recent. Seberg, I think. That was some FBI stuff.
Well, you mentioned Affleck and Argo. I mean, Argo.
Seberg.
Plot of Argo is a real.
It's a real thing that happened.
Where CIA used movie cover to do this. Actually, that's happened quite a bit. And it's not just CIA, like other intelligence agencies and movies can be a great cover for doing something like.
Are there any that are known that have happened where it's be like, this isn't conjecture, this is for a fact happened, other than Argo? He's thinking about it.
I'm thinking really hard. I'm trying to remember back to.
He's thinking about it.
There's a known British company that was doing films as a Soviet cover. So the Soviets actually had a British film company at one point. That's covered at my buddy who's a Russia historian and analyst, Mark Hackert. He did a translation of a KGB colonel's diaries and whatnot, and so that one of those recounts one of their espionage outfits in the UK. The FBI created a whole film company that was like a cutout in LA that was an independent studio that was just for surveilling different stuff.
Really?
Yeah, that's in chapter 1 of my book.
Yeah, I don't doubt any of it.
But I can't think of another confirmed instance where the whole film was. The closest thing I can think of is that one of the guys involved in the Scooter Libby stuff back with the neocons under Bush, he went and produced a film with Dolph Lundgren in some country.
Yeah,
and
good get.
I feel like that was probably some kind of cover. So
Who is the KGB defector in the 80s that came to the US and he was telling people like be prepared for what's about to happen? I think it's like a KGB.
Yuri Bezmenov.
Right.
Yeah.
What was that whole point of that the clip that all over the place on YouTube? Was that just trying to make Americans aware of what the KGB was doing or what the two governments had planned as far as?
Well, what he says in those lectures, and if you remember, anybody who defects, they're going to be spouting the narrative of their new master. So really, Yuri Bezmenov's talks, it's not that they're all false, but they're all
taken with a grain of salt.
Conformed to a CIA narrative, because he has to put out now what the CIA wants. And so the problem with his account is that he makes it like it's the KGB running everything. Mm-hmm. Well, there's not KGB anymore. I'm sorry. Right. I mean, yeah, there are people that are Russian intelligence. The
FSB.
Yeah, but the idea that KGB runs everything is just completely fiction. It's just absurd, right? And I mean, who's running the Great Reset? It's not Putin. It's not the KGB. It's Klaus. It's the Fortune 100. Okay, that's who's behind the Great Reset.
Which is, can they be classified as independent entities, or they just have too many hands and too many? I'm assuming no government organizations, right? Like these are all private banks, they're all private businesses.
Well, I think they run the public government, so they kind of control it. So it's kind of a front. I mean, I'm sure there's a level of independence, I guess you could say, but really the long-term goals everyone's agreed on. So the goals of transhumanism, the goals of world government, world currency, depopulation. Nobody in the top, tiers disagrees with those goals.
I'm not eating bugs. I'm not.
No bugs for me.
Chickens could eat the bugs. What's the whole idea?
I'm gonna eat Greta.
Greta?
I'm gonna literally eat Greta.
Yeah.
Thunberg?
Wouldn't that be weird?
How dare you? All you care about is money.
How dare you?
Can you do a good Greta? Or your voice is a lot deeper than mine.
I did a Greta on Twitter, but
as in you typed it out.
No,
or you actually did it.
There's a video.
Oh, it was a video. Okay. What was the movie with Robert De Niro about the forming of the CIA from the OSS?
The Good Shepherd.
The Good Shepherd. How do you like that movie? Do you think that was somewhat of an accurate?
It's pretty accurate, yeah, because the Matt Damon character goes and learns his craft from the British spies, and then they kind of help set up that nascent OSS. So,
interesting.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate, and the way that he's recruited and the sort of tensions between the Catholics and the Protestant, the WASPs,
right?
With the Robert De Niro character and all that is, I think that's all pretty accurate. And it has the reference to the Skull and Bones, and a lot of the early CIA OSS people were recruited out of Yale and so forth. So I think that's accurate.
How much of a prominent role do you think societies like Skull and Bones, the Illuminati, like how important do you think they are?
It's a key way to get into that power structure, or to be recruited into it, or to be networked, because those are just older. If you want to understand really what Freemasonry and this kind of stuff is,
I was just about to ask.
Yeah, it's really that was the spy network of the British Empire. And there's a good mainline historian book, Jessica Harlan Jacobs wrote a book called Builders of Empire, and it's really just pointing out that was the espionage network the British Empire had set up. And if you think about it, cults, secret societies, intelligence agencies all kind of do the same stuff.
Yeah.
And they like actors. I mean, you can find actors that were spies going all the way back to like the Elizabethan period. So, those worlds overlap.
Right. Like Freemasonry, doesn't it go back to like the Knights Templar and all that? Does it go that far back?
They would say so. I mean, they have a narrative of their own origins. They say going back to the beginning of the world. But I don't know that. I mean, they're also known for lying. So I don't know. I mean, Albert Pike says in Morals and Dogma that they intentionally deceive the lower grades. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I don't think you can trust their own history of themselves. But I think modern Freemasonry comes out of the Enlightenment and the Renaissance. And so there's probably a tenuous connection to the Templars, but I don't think a lot of the mythology about the Templars is true. I think it's a lot of baloney.
Okay. Now, I wanted to ask you this question, just because I haven't researched you as thoroughly as I would have liked, just because we got you on last week. Are you conservative? Are you apolitical? Where would you lean? I mean, obviously you have a show with Voldemort, so I would assume that you lead a certain way. But I have a follow-up question related to the answer.
I would say 10 years ago, I did a lot of political commentary. I was really interested in politics. I'm a lot less interested in politics now that I'm, a little older and not as idealistic. So I think you kind of wise up. You get a little black-pilled about politics.
Right.
I mean, I'll talk about stories here and there, but I find the macro scale meta politics a lot more interesting than like the dog and pony softball stuff that goes on in America. I don't really follow that very closely. But in terms of my views, yeah, I would definitely be more of a social conservative. I'm not a libertarian. I'm very critical of libertarian free market stuff. I mean, there's aspects of it that I appreciate, but like classical liberalism, I critique quite a bit. So,
okay.
How long have you been hosting the 4th Hour Voldemort show?
About the last year.
Oh, okay. Because sometimes PJW does it.
Yeah, there's about 5 of us that kind of rotate. 6, yeah.
Okay.
That do the 4th hour.
Okay.
But yeah, he does good, and trying to remember who else. Gerald Salente does it, and a couple of the Christy Lee, a couple of the girls that work over there do it. So
they produce a lot of content over there. It's really incredible because they each do like 3 or 4 hour shows.
Yeah.
And then sometimes he'll go live that 7th day of the week that he's not meant to go live. He calls like an emergency live broadcast. It's the best.
I did Sunday 2003. We're gonna be live for the next 7 hours.
Yeah, better than mine. That's for sure.
We're very likely. I mentioned to you on one of the
I actually brought the documents. Folks, I've got the documents.
Yeah,
I literally did bring the documents because I didn't know where we would go today. So
right. Yeah, I saw you walk in. I was like, oh, he's got documents. Yeah.
Him and the documents. We're probably going to be able to go over there to Austin and maybe use their studios to interview Voldemort and his cronies.
Awesome.
At some point later this summer, which would be great. Yeah.
So he is the exact same in person as he is.
That's exactly what my friend Savannah says, who used to produce for them. Yeah.
Wait, will he want me to sit on his lap though?
It depends. I mean, he was really intent on like getting Jamie to eat pizza, so he like kept offering Jamie pizza when we were hanging out.
You're vegan? You just don't eat cheese?
No, it's just funny.
I just wasn't hungry.
Yeah.
This wonderful pizza. Does he want this pizza? Wonderful.
Well, there's a conspiracy still to. It's not a conspiracy. It's outright they're just trying to get me to drink raw eggs constantly. So I feel you, Jamie, on that one.
Raw egg nationalism. He won't drink raw eggs on camera.
No.
I don't know what it is.
I just won't even do it.
I gross her out when I do it.
Oh, you do it?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. How many
Mike.
eggs in a glass per?
I don't even put it in the glass. Like I
just crack it open over you? Do you really?
That's savage. That's next level.
Yeah.
Well, I got into carnivore diets, so that changed everything for me.
Yeah.
Do you drink raw milk?
No, I don't process it well. So the reason I got into carnivore was because of like health issues.
Yeah, it's amazing how many people I know who've gotten into the carnivore diet and healed a lot of their autoimmune issues or whatever. Because I think the big misconception about carnivore is that they think that you just eat like steak, but it's head to tail.
No. Jordan Peterson. It was actually Jordan Peterson and Michaela Peterson's talks on that got me into it. Because one of my buddies that I do a lot of live streams with, Primal Edge Health, shout out to Tristan, he would do these podcasts and I thought it was nuts. I was like, this is crazy. Meat diet?
Yeah,
what?
It sounds crazy.
And he's like, and you don't eat green. That was the crazy part, is not eat greens.
You have to unlearn that.
And so I listened to him and I was really skeptical, but I had really, bad like stomach issues that nothing worked. And then I heard Jordan Peterson and Michaela Peterson talking about it. And I was like, well, if it works, like, I guess I'll try it out.
Because it sounds like Michaela was going through some severe autoimmune issues.
Really big issues.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But she even talked about like she did the carnivore diet, or I guess it was only red meat for her, and then tried to like, okay, this is working. Let me try like a little bit of like apple juice or something, and then it completely came back. And she's like, it's only red meat and water. Yeah. So are you only red meat and water, or are there different aspects too?
I didn't have to get that extreme, but I was pretty bad. So I had to do like 95 to 95% meat. Like I might have a little bit of potato, a little bit of carbs, here and
starch,
there, but very, very, very low.
And has that kind of cleaned up everything?
Mostly, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
That's great.
Oh,
so you can't eat those cookies I baked.
That's what I was telling you at the beginning.
Okay.
I walk in here and there's like beer and cookies. Like
that's right.
Like the two things I don't eat.
Gavin's Budweiser down there.
Well, that's what I told him. Do you ever critique or debate with anarchists?
We've had let's see, two anarcho-libertarian debates.
What's their thing? What's their whole modus operandi? Like, what is their whole? Just nothing. No groups, no hierarchy, nothing. No government, nothing.
Well, I mean, that's the talking point, but I mean, like, then they want you to follow them and they're leader of their group.
So there is a hierarchy.
So there's always a
at some
hierarchy.
point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean,
I don't get how these like anarcho-capitalists, how can like those two seem diametrically opposed to each other?
Yes, I would agree with that critique, actually. Okay. So I remember debating Kokesh, and we debated libertarianism and atheism. So he was an anarcho-libertarian atheist, and we debated both of those topics. That was my first public debate, and then debated Stefan Molyneux on the same topics, basically.
Oh, interesting.
So I don't think they had a good defense.
I'm just always worried if I would ever be asked to debate an anarchist. I don't know. Would it even be fruitful? No.
Waste
probably
of
not.
time, maybe.
It could be entertaining content. So.
Yeah, that's the thing.
I close up during a debate because unlike you, I'm sure that you can spout off, data points, statistics, historical references. I'll just be like, I don't like it, and that's it. That's my argument.
Out.
Yeah, I don't like it.
I think men are much better suited to debate. Just let you guys do
I'm
it.
pretty much a Spurg, so I can go crazy with debate. It drives her crazy.
Are you? Is that what do they call it?
An official diagnosis.
Right. Yes. Yeah, exactly. That's fine. They're probably
my Spurg is on
fleek.
Here. I don't know. I don't know. That's my diagnosis. Right?
Wait, I want to backtrack for a second and ask you, what if someone were interested to learn more about Orthodox Christianity, what are some books that you would recommend or a good places to start? Because I'm going to take notes.
I mean, if a person I usually tailor that recommendation to their background, so it would depend on where they're coming from. So say
like me coming from a Protestant background.
So if I was a Protestant person looking at Orthodoxy, I would say read something like, there's a good book by Dr. Clark Carlton. It's a 3-part thing, and one's for Catholics, one's for Protestants, one's for like atheists, I think. It's called The Way, the Truth, and the Life. I forget which one. I think it's The Way. It's the one for Protestants. Yeah. So that's a good book. And then, for people that are Catholics, I would say something like Vladimir Lossky's book, Mystical Theology of the Eastern Church, is really good. For people who want like just a total historical introduction, I would say John Meyendorff has a book called The Church, or the Orthodox Church.
Great.
Those are some good intros.
You like films?
Oh yeah.
Safe to say. What was the last movie you watched that really made you think? A lot of movies that leave an impression on me, I can't help but think for at least 2 weeks after I'm watching it, still thinking about it.
It's funny you said that, because we were just talking about how not very many movies anymore really move me or impress me. Unmoved by movies. So, I mean, I can think of a couple that we did, just joking podcasts that were fun to analyze. We do a lot of B movies, kind of inspired by like Mystery Science Theater, Rich Racks. So we like to make fun of the bad movies. But the last one that I thought was kind of weird and esoteric was an indie movie called Come True, about this chick that I was about to spoil the plot. So I won't tell you what happens to her, but there's really weird Carl Jungian elements going on in this film, and me and some other film nerds, we did a breakdown of that. But that was good. I think it's a 2020 movie. Okay. If you're looking for like a philosophical movie, but I honestly don't remember the last moving film that I've watched, although we have been watching a lot of documentaries. There's a good documentary that has me in it, believe it or not. That's pretty good.
What is it?
Other than me, it's called Hollywood DC. It's Sean Stone's documentary, that Oliver Stone's son. So it's got me, Oliver Stone, Sean Stone, Greg Palast, the journalist. That one's good, and it just got deleted from YouTube. So it got censored because Oliver Stone's Hollywood,
right?
Ukraine,
right? Yeah. Okay. So speaking of that, Oliver Stone did he do the documentary? Was he featured in that documentary, Ukraine on Fire?
I think he produced it.
Okay. Now, why was it taken? Do you know why it was taken down? Just because any narrative against Ukraine is
contrary to the narrative.
Really?
Yeah.
Geez.
So Sean moved it to Rumble and Rockfin. So
okay.
It is available, but that's a pretty good documentary on like documenting the Hollywood deep state propaganda stuff. That's not extremely conspiratorial. It's just, journalists and people who've, documented this kind of stuff. So that's a good documentary, but I don't know, man. What's the last movie you saw that was moving? She made us sound.
Did you enjoy Arrival?
That was the only one.
I made fun of it.
You didn't like Arrival?
I dressed up like George Tsoukalos from Ancient Aliens, and I was impersonating him talking about it. So.
Oh no,
that's one of the few movies that stuck with me for a little while.
But is that Villanueva?
Yeah.
So I do like. I did like
Villeneuve.
Villeneuve.
I did like Dune. I'm a big Dune fan. So.
Dune.
I didn't read.
Did you watch Jimmy Dory?
Yeah.
Did you see when Al Pacino called in to talk about Dune? He's like, I saw a trailer for a movie called Dune. And Jimmy's like, oh yeah, what do you think about it? He's like, I don't know what it is. It's a horrible Al Pacino. He's like, well, it's a guy. It takes place in the future, and there's this what do they call it? There's a spice, and basically what runs the world. And there's a guy named Duncan, Idaho, and he's like, Duncan, Idaho, 400 years in the future. And there's a guy named Duncan, Idaho running around. Whoa. And he's like, Brian Eno did the soundtrack. He's like, Brian Eno, this movie's great. But it's a horrible Al Pacino. But yeah, you like Dune.
I do. Well, I like the David Lynch Dune.
I'm a very big David Lynch fan.
Well, I like to have coffee in the morning, and then I write for a little bit, and that's how you write a movie.
I was like, this one interview I saw with him, and he was like,
well, I very much like nude women.
It's like the question wasn't even about that.
I like
Tell us about you. What do you like?
I like nude women.
Very direct and not lying. What do you think about? Okay, so this movie messed me up for a while. Eraserhead.
Eraserhead?
David Lynch's first feature-length film, correct?
Yeah,
it was Eraserhead.
It's we're trying to remember the name for that weird niche genre of body horror that's
right. Body like
zygote. It's zygote horror. There's like
are there a lot of movies with zygote?
Well, there's
horror?
not a lot. There's like 10 like baby horror movies, and
okay,
David Lynch says that was
because I just figured out what body horror means because we watched this movie called Titanic. The French.
Oh, yeah.
Did you guys hear about this movie? The one that
Regis recommended.
Oh yeah, it's this French movie about this girl who gets into a car accident and has a titanium plate put in her head.
Yeah, I saw that trailer.
And now she just like bangs cars and people and kills them.
Was it good? Regis loved it.
Regis Philbin?
No, we have a friend.
We have a friend who basically named the show and is probably one of the brightest minds, while also loving early 2000s pop culture, which is kind of like it's a weird contrary statement saying this guy has one of the brightest minds, but he also loves Britney Spears.
Is he a Spurg?
Spurg? Spurg? What's that?
That sounds like.
Oh no! Okay, no.
Okay.
No, he's not. But anyway, yeah, he likes these weird kind of movies. I don't know if I like that movie. It's just weird. It's weird. But I just recently found out what the genre of body horror was, and I think that movie was in it.
It would be, yeah. Well, we were watching a bunch of bad Offspring movies, horror movies. Like Unborn and all these weird ones.
What was the movie that you were going to try and talk about? But this was like in the Phantoms one. It was something that I watched the trailer. It was like Road to Hell or something, but Ben Stiller's in it, and he's
Highway to Hell. That one is
what
fun.
Is that?
That is an excellent B movie that is a Dante's Inferno trip to the underworld and back. In literature, it's the Katabasis. The hero has to go into the underworld and sort of save, the hero, the girl, bring her back. Also in Christianity, by the way, Jesus goes to the underworld and comes back. So, Bowman, 2001. That's it's the Odysseus story, right?
Right.
To the underworld and back. But yeah, that was a fun B movie. It was better than I expected. I like those
weird
movies
weird freaking movies. Here's a genre, maybe we can try and find one of your favorite movies. So a movie that is about something, but is also about something completely different. So like Jacob's Ladder, Vietnam War, but then also kind of like this like weird, not psychedelic, but kind of like...
What's about like the afterlife.
Yes.
Because we broke that down. Yeah, that is a good one. A movie that's about something and about something totally different.
Yeah. I think that's like where Jacob's Ladder falls under. If you haven't seen it, it's a really good movie.
Is it?
Yeah, it's with Tim Robbins.
Mm-hmm.
I like him.
So when we did Jacob's Ladder, we paired it up with a weird, not that great, but at the same time fascinating horror movie, Empty Man. Did you see Empty Man?
No.
It's really weird and it's very flawed, but it is also about two different things at once. So on the one hand, you're watching this, this guy's sort of descent into madness and trying to figure out what's going on, big cosmic conspiracy type of thing. And then it turns into a Tibetan Buddhist end times cult mythology. It gets wild.
What was that movie with it's a guy like doing ayahuasca or something like that, and he comes back and he's in the hyperbaric chamber. Oh Lord. Altered States, yeah. Is it kind of like an Altered States kind of vibe?
No. Well, maybe in some respects, but this is it's almost like three different movies in one. It's like this. There's the three acts take place in totally different domains, and I kind of like it when movies just go like way crazy in other directions. And even if they twist me around like 6 times, it doesn't really bother me. But it's a mind F. Like that.
I like mind F movies. Uncut Gems is probably like a pretty level-headed mind F movie.
I've not seen it yet. Everybody talks about it.
Yeah, very good. Okay. Very good. You should see it.
Okay.
You should watch it. Have you heard of the movie? I think it's The Scary of 64th or something like that. It's this independent horror movie about the Epstein apartment. These girls move into Epstein's old apartment, and then
I saw the trailer. I've not seen it.
Yes.
Is it worth watching?
I don't know. I haven't seen it.
Okay.
Yeah. That's why I asked you.
Well, we do watch a lot of weird, creepy, occult horror movies. So.
Yeah, I would love to do movie breakdowns, but you seem like a cinephile, like a nerd, like a movie nerd. I don't know if I'm on that level.
I'm not very sophisticated, like with foreign films and snobby. Like I don't.
Right.
But I just got into it because I've always liked movies. We grew up in a small town where there's not much to do. So you're either on meth or you're pregnant or you're involved in the arts.
Right, exactly.
So there wasn't a lot to do. And I think a lot of people, in my circles, we got into the arts and we were all movie buffs, like everybody in high school that I hung out with. And then, I took college classes on like history and film.
Okay.
And that's kind of what really piqued my interest.
Yeah.
But I'm not super knowledgeable about it.
How do you feel about conservatives now getting into this whole, we got to take back culture. We got to start making movies too. And there was
Pure Flicks, all the ads that come up on my
right, like
before I got demonetized.
Yeah, there was a time where there were movies that would have I hate calling them, it has like a Christian undertone to it, or there are these guys that are kind of there are these playwrights and stuff. Who's the big one that gets thrown around a lot? Not Bret Easton Ellis, but oh God, he wrote the Put That Coffee Down, Always Be Selling, the Alec Baldwin movie with Alec Baldwin, Al Pacino, Kevin Spacey. They're salesmen. Come on.
Glenn
Ross. Yeah. Who wrote it?
Hold on.
No, see, this is we do a very bad job of having a show because there really should be no dead air, but now I'm just rambling. This is the problem. No edits.
David Mamet.
Oh, David Mamet. Like Mallet is said to be somewhat of not a conservative, but he's definitely.
Yeah, I remember he had his libertarian turn. He became a libertarian sometime in the mid 2010s, I think.
It just seems as like this weird thing. Like we gotta make like conservative art, and we gotta take over this culture. And every time it's attempted, I just see it as this big like whiff.
So I think that the key to that is to look at the way that classic Christianity did it. If you read Dostoevsky, I mean, he's writing Orthodox philosophy into his novels. If you get into, there's, for example, modern Orthodox Russian films are pretty good. There's Man of God, there's The Island, and these are really well-made foreign films in the sense of Russian Orthodox Christian films.
Really?
So I think that would be the best way to do it. But and I'm not trying to be mean to all the evangelicals, but when evangelicals do it and they just try to basically copy the existing structure and sound and aesthetic, it just comes off as really cheap, cheesy.
Yeah,
it's way too on the nose.
Well, exactly. Or if you go even more on the nose with something like Passion of the Christ and Mel Gibson, that's just blatantly like just a Catholic guy making a Catholic movie. It just happens to be Mel Gibson, but there's nothing really out like that because they're like places like the Daily Wire are moving into movies now, and it's just whatever.
Yeah, I think so. Like we always laugh about these ads that pop up on the videos, Pure Flicks, and it's like these evangelical megachurch movies that they make, and they're so cheesy. It's
Like Hallmark movies.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's not necessarily taking back culture.
No, it's not at all.
And I'm not saying, leave culture up to leftists. So I'm just saying there's got to be a better way to go about it than
I think the depth and the philosophy that you have about Christianity will determine the depth of the art that you produce. And so, for example, think about the aesthetics of the Orthodox. When you walk into an Orthodox church, and I mean, everybody admits it's like the best aesthetics, right?
Yeah.
So whether you think it's true or not, it's like the best aesthetics, religiously speaking.
We got the best looks.
Yeah. Don't you think they're going to produce good stories?
Right.
I mean, Dostoevsky's like the next Shakespeare. So I think he's a preeminent example of how that type of Christianity can produce the best type of art.
Okay.
I like that. Yeah.
And, there's quite a few, like the Russian government, whatever you think of them, like they have in the last several decades been putting money into wholesome projects that aren't cheeseball. So go watch The Island, the Russian, not the Michael Bay movie, The Island, the Russian movie. It's on YouTube. Watch Man of God.
Yeah. Who was, the World War II movie Come and See? It's like this weird, really like hyper realistic movie about, I don't think Poles in Russia. I think it has to do with the Nazis in some Slavic region, one of the Slavic regions. And I think the movie was made in the 80s. Super hyper realistic. They used live fire when they were shooting some scenes, and just like submitted the main actor through just like this torturous regime of making this movie. But there's a Russian director who gets copied a lot. They did it with that Leonardo DiCaprio movie, The Revenant. A lot of the scenes and setups in that movie mirror this one Russian director.
Is it Tarkovsky?
Yeah, Tarkovsky. Yeah.
So his son is sort of he just put out a documentary on his dad, and so my priest is friends with him because he's a Russian priest, and so we're trying to set up this interview, which he's agreed to do it, but he's hopefully in the next year he'll come on my channel. We're going to do a sort of a review of all the Tarkovsky canon.
Oh, interesting.
So and he's got some good ones too. I forgot to mention Rublev. That's obviously a Orthodox classic that Tarkovsky did. Stalker is pretty good. I have a hard time. I'm still deciphering what Stalker's about, but I'm not a huge fan of Solaris. But yeah, there's a lot of.
Oh, that's right.
He's like the Kubrick of Russia.
Of Russia. Yeah. Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
As we're winding down here, what is something that you would? Because I asked this question to Nick. What is something that you would maybe push people, or something to research for people to research on their own, or kind of look into because you find it interesting yourself?
Orthodoxy, I guess, would be the first one. Take a look at Orthodox Christianity. Go check out a liturgy, or watch it on YouTube or something if you can't go to one. There's a good documentary called Fountain of Immortality that explains Orthodoxy from a unique angle. There's another really good documentary called The Icon. It's a 7-part documentary that explains Orthodoxy from the vantage point of aesthetics. So those are good ones to check out. Go watch the documentary that Sean Stone did, Hollywood DC, because that was kind of highlighted one of the things that I was up to. What else should people check into? The Transcendental Argument for God.
Okay.
If you're an atheist, if you're a skeptic, an agnostic, and you want a logical argument for God's existence, you could see that in the debate that I did with Matt Dillahunty or Stefan Molyneux, where we present the Transcendental Argument. So those are a couple of things that come to mind.
The Transcendental Argument for God. Yeah. Oh, okay. Very interesting.
Cool.
Well, thanks, Jay.
Yeah, dude.
Thanks for coming. Look at that. Like almost like 2 hours.
Thank you for making the drive. We really
a lot of fun.
Yeah, really appreciate it.
I
was honored that you guys asked.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, thank the YouTube commenters who sometimes get it right.
Now that we know you're not too far away, we'll have you on again.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Maybe like when we do like a first live show or something like that, but in front of people, we can have a local panel. I think.
I mean, honestly, sometimes I feel a little bit like a normie talking to you. I'm like, gosh, there's a lot of things I need to.
Yeah. No dearth of knowledge there.
Where can everybody find you?
So I have a website that's kind of all of my stuff goes there, jaysanalysis.com. There's a membership section for like getting access to the archives, all the lectures and talks the last 5 years or so. Like I said, we do the Global Elite book series where I lecture through all the writings of the elite. That's all there. I'm on YouTube under my name, social media under my name. And then we're big fans of Rockfin, which I was going to tell you guys you should get over on Rockfin.
What's that?
It's a platform. Jimmy Dore is over on Rockfin. He's
one
of the big names over there. I'm over there. Whitney Webb's over there. Richard Grove is over there. A lot of good independent media people are over there.
Cool.
And they're a great platform. So I'm a big fan of Rockfin. So follow me there. I do put exclusive content over there as well. And then you can find me over at Lord Voldemort's site, usually on the 4th hour, either Wednesday or Thursday. But
cool.
Yeah.
Nice. Thanks, Jay.
Thank you very much.
You guys.
Bye, everybody.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Cool.
That was great. That was a nice departure from the last, how long? Hour and a